don't know why do you want to be the face of a league when all the people that that cover our game and talk about our game on a day-to-day basis on everybody. I mean, have that responsibility. It's just weird. It's weird energy from the people that I don't know, but. Channing, he said it. He said it perfectly. Couldn't have said it no better. But Ant said he don't want it.
So LeBron had that to say after Anthony Edwards made the statement that he doesn't want to be the next face of the NBA. Obviously, as fans, we're in a place right now where we're waiting to crown that next face of the league. I think it's an important conversation to have because one of the most important things for the NBA, especially from a branding perspective, is to have a face of the league. Of course, to a certain degree, that can be pretty subjective, but from a fan's perspective, especially from my perspective, the vibe of the game just feels better when we know that we have that guy to root for or root against. Once that's established, I think it just creates a new experience as a fan watching the NBA. Like back in 2013, we knew LeBron was the guy. We knew that he was the face of basketball. You either loved him or you hated him, and what made the fan experience fun was going into games, either wanting to watch him dominate and climb up the all-time ladder, or just root against them, right? Those are things that are important to us as fans. Same as Jordan in the 90s. I can't really quantify it, but there does seem to be a much better vibe when we actually have an established face of the NBA. Right now, we're in a limbo in that conversation. There's Nikola Jokic that's in the mix, there's Giannis, and obviously Anthony Edwards. I'll start with the reason that Ant works perfectly as the face of the league. He passes the aesthetics test very well. Ant is a must-watch player. Not only is he scary athletic, as he can explode for like a big dunk out of nowhere or get a game-winning block at any second, but he also has this super polished scoring attack. He can hit tough shots off the dribble. He just generally has a very exciting style of basketball, an aesthetically pleasing style of basketball that he plays. And this is also something that is super important. He passes what I call the personality test, which is pretty self-explanatory. He's competitive as hell, and he's very vocal about it. That's stuff that we fell in love with players like Russell Westbrook and Kobe and Jordan about. Anthony Edwards has that in his personality, and he doesn't hide it. So the idea of Anthony Edwards being the next face of basketball works perfectly. I'm not saying that Giannis and Jokic don't, because they're amazing, and in my opinion right now, they're the top two players in the league, but Ant has a certain flair to him that just works when we're making those conversations about him being the next face of the NBA. But I'd have to agree with Bron's sentiment here. Obviously, as I mentioned before, Ant said a few weeks ago that he doesn't want to be the face of the league. At first, I didn't get it. Like, why would you reject that title? Like, who doesn't grow up wanting to be the face of the NBA? Isn't that something that you always dream and work towards? But LeBron summed it up the absolute best. With that title comes a ridiculous amount of expectations and critiques, and a lot of those times, a lot of those expectations and critiques are extremely over the top. Let's think about the conversations around LeBron. Yes, obviously there are times where people in the media are saying amazing things about him, and he's had these ridiculous levels of praise, but then you have the hot take guys, right? The dudes that have flat out ruined basketball discourse. For pretty much every LeBron championship after 2012, there came these comparisons to Jordan, these constant, annoying comparisons to Jordan. Yes, those combos are natural as basketball fans, but when you immediately start comparing after an accomplishment, it passively downplays that accomplishment. We're not taking the time to appreciate it. We're immediately jumping into these debates. Again, it's natural. I get it. We're fans. We do this, but it can get to a point where it's pretty toxic. For LeBron's entire career, he's had to hear himself be compared to others and constantly downplayed if he ran into hardships. For example, if LeBron loses in a final series, it isn't always LeBron's a great player and he just lost in a final series. It's something like Jordan would have never lost this series, or Jordan went 6 for 6 throughout his NBA Finals career. Who wants to work for a whole season and focus on all of these details just to hear so-called journalists and fans constantly say that type of stuff about him? And to be fair, there are other pro-LeBron conversations that happen when he loses championships, such as like that entire he carried his team argument, which I really hate, but that's an entirely different conversation for another day. All in all, the point is, when you're the face of the league, you're subject to these ridiculous critiques and comparisons and all of these things. So I see why a player would want to avoid having that crown. But the issue is this: Ant nor LeBron get to choose if they're the face of the league. The fans make that choice. They react to what you do on the court, and they go from there and follow accordingly. You can say you reject the title, but you can't really reject the title unless you choose not to be a dominant player. If you are a dominant player, if you are winning championships over X amount of years and doing all of these things, then that title as the face of the league is going to follow you around until the next guy comes around. So I think what Bron said should be taken as a fair critique of sports media more than anything else. We know a player can't really reject being the face of the league, but the most pressing thing here is how hot take culture and current NBA discourse is extremely toxic. And I will say this, I think generally things are moving into a better direction as far as NBA discourse and conversations and talking points. A lot of content creators have found a niche where they're speaking to fans who are tired of that discourse themselves. Hell, even think about LeBron and JJ Redick when they started that podcast. They literally designed that podcast to move us away from hot take culture and get us to a point to where we're actually appreciating the game. So me personally as a fan, I'd love for Ant to embrace that title as the potential face of the league, but in return, we as fans have to be fair. We can't say we want Anthony Edwards to embrace that title and at the exact same time continue on that toxic discourse. We're constantly comparing guys and downplaying accomplishments and all of those things. There is definitely a return on that. This isn't to say that he wouldn't be deserving of any criticism if he doesn't play well in the playoffs or maybe in an NBA final series if he's able to get there, but we all know where the line is between fair criticism and the over-the-top ridiculous criticism that we hear all over NBA TV and all over NBA media in general.